My single shot rifle is finally repaired and I put up a new target, and with that I will teach you how to do wind calls. I'll show you how to shoot wind with a second focal plane scope, and I'll show you how to do it with a first focal plane scope. And it's going to be a boring episode. We talk and talk. This target is at 582, and if you remember, we had a horizontal bar to show how temperature and air pressure were moving the bullet up and down and how to do the trajectory validation. This year we also added a vertical post here, and the purpose of this is to quantify what 1 and 2 meter per second error in the wind call looks like. So this distance here is exactly 3 clicks wide, or with my cartridge an error margin of 1 meter per second. And we're going to demonstrate the difference between the simple techniques, which we have previously shown, and the more accurate techniques. And also the difference between shooting with a first focal plane scope and a second focal plane scope. And my plan with this target here is that it will hopefully better illustrate what will happen when we include both the ballistics and the wind calls, and the difference between the precise wind call and the more crude versions. We will still stick to very simple techniques. It will still be about basic marksmanship, but this time we're also going to talk a fair bit more about equipment choices and what bullets to use and what bullets not to use. And so you will learn what shots you can take and what shots you can't take. Okay? Wish us luck. Things very rarely go to plan.
This episode contains sponsored items. Before you go, subscribe, like and comment. Click the bell if you want notifications of new episodes.
It's actually quite a simple test. One target, 1 minute, and you either hit it or you don't. The range is a little more than 500, and it's an excellent test of your work routines. Now I have my target at 514, and it doesn't really matter what sort of excuses you have. You either succeed or you don't. That's the target. Wind right. So not a very good hit there. It was okay for windage, despite using the simple windage rules, but it was a bit low on elevation. Now this season we're going to talk about the differences between using a second focal plane like I have on my K95 and a first focal plane like you will see on my R8. Now within its limitations, the second focal plane will not give you any issues. For most hunting it's going to be a quite good choice. We'll just switch out this barrel and we'll put on the traditional scope just to repeat the message from last year. That's basically, if you are using a traditional scope like this, you really have no business shooting at the long ranges. Now, despite me knowing exactly that I need to hold 85 centimeters up, I'm not going to have much success doing this. Let's see, the plate is 50, that's 50, so I should be aiming roughly somewhere around here. And I still have to do the same wind call. It's coming in from the right. No, didn't even hit the target. Let's try again. It is possible to get hits, but it's in no way an efficient way. That was below, I hit right there. And you really should restrict yourself to the shorter ranges if you're using the traditional scopes. That was a center hit. on the third shot. And basically, you really have no business shooting at these ranges. Okay, so we'll just calibrate the new barrel. The Ballistic app suggests 4.5 emerald or 45 clicks. And we'll see whether or not that fits the actual impact. So that's the target. Pretty good. One high. One low. But we call 4.5 good enough. And as you remember from previous seasons, this is the Ballistic bar which I use for calibration. Height of this bar is exactly one scope clip, and this year it's at 608 meter. And the reason for shooting this is that this rifle now has a new barrel, and I had to check the predicted ballistics versus actual performance. So this was the suggested 4.5 emerald, and this was me with a correction, and with some shooter error and being out of shape, I just going to leave it at 4.5. Now over 5 barrels, the variation at 600 between the barrels with the same ammunition has been a whopping 2 clicks. So very steady production process on these barrels. And the rifle and ammunition is actually precise enough to place the shots on the bar. That's the benefit of using quality ammunition. Also note how quick this process was this year, and very little work to reconfirm the trajectory and keep shooting just as you were. Once you've done the ballistic calibration, you can shoot at any range without having to redo this procedure. If I put in 582, wants me to go 4 down, and the elevation should be equally perfect here. And now we'll just demonstrate the benefit of using a first focal plane and shooting at the long ranges, because now we have a meter inside the reticle which allows us to put a number on the wind and arrive at an exact figure, and we should be able to shoot a lot more precise at farther range than you could with a second focal plane scope. Okay, now the thumb rule for the 6.5 is basically half the hundreds. So at a target at 582, which is almost 600, half the hundreds it's 600, half the hundreds it's 3, and that's your base value for 1, wind speed 1. And when I look around, I see light occasional movement, I see continuous movement, and I'm also seeing the direction of the wind, but I'm not seeing the vegetation bend anywhere. All of this you can find in the Carless range book. So that's 1, 2 steps, and half the 100, 2 by 3 is 6. And the wind doesn't come in straight from the side, it comes in at an angle, which means I'm going to put that value at half. So I'm going to hold half. That's the target. Half of 6 is 0.3. I'm going to hold to the right. And if you remember, the left and right hand side of that cross equals an error of 1 meter per second. Now I want to hold into the wind. With this target, I do not want to cross center line, which means I put the bullet into forbidden area, so to speak. So my error is maximum 1 meter per second, not a plus or minus, but the total from the minimum to the maximum. My maximum error allowed is 1 meter per second. Okay, so that was perfect for elevation. And from rear engineering, my wind call was 0.3 meter per second off. Now, this number doesn't have any value with a second focal plane because I can't quantify it and I can't hold it in the scope. So this is the strength of the first focal plane. Okay, 2 shots left. I'm going to try that with the K95. It's not going to work. And when I say it's not going to work, it's not because it is a K95. For sure, it is a more demanding rifle to shoot, but the reason it doesn't work is that it is a second focal plane scope. So with that scope, I can only use crude rules, and I will have to accept that my margin of error is much bigger than it will be on a first focal plane scope. Okay, so that's my target. Now with the first focal plane scope, I was able to put an exact number on the wind and the wind hold and hold accordingly. And as you see on this scope, there is nothing. Now I have the option of taking off the side turret and start clicking here, but as you see, that's not a very practical proposition compared to just holding in the reticle. So the best I can do at this range is use the simplified rules, determine left or right, and if it's a light, medium or a strong wind, I'm going to put it at a medium wind. Way off, all the way over on the other side. So typical for a second focal plane at this range. I cannot put a number on the wind and I can't really hold properly. Okay, so that's the R8. Half the bullet skidded here, entered here, and this here is 2.5 centimeters tall at 5.82. I was approximately 6 centimeters off on the wind call, which is 0.1 emerald. And this works solely because I can put a number on the wind, I can calculate the drift, and I can hold that value in the first focal plane scope. I can make some sort of excuse for it, but it is really a reflection on my current state of marksmanship. The takeaway is that the wind was in from the right. I was not supposed to cross this center line here, and still I had 1-2 meters per second error on the wind call, which is very similar to what I have implied earlier, that you will have to accept a larger margin of error when you do use a second focal plane scope. I have one shot left, we're going to try that as well. Now the simplified message, lappa and pointed bullets. So the moment I have some wind, I will start holding into the wind. You first determine if you have a left or right wind, and if you have a left or right wind, it's never going to be a perfect hit if you aim dead center. Now in this case we clearly have a right wind, so I'm going to hold somewhere on the right hand side of the target. You always hold into the wind. Now if you have a very light wind, you're going to hit on the immediate side of your aiming point. So that means I would be aiming like this with a weak right wind, and the bullet will strike somewhere immediate left of my aiming point. Now if I have a medium wind, I'm going to hold at the very edge of what I consider to be the acceptable point of impact. And if you have what we would call a strong wind, I would have to put some air between my crosshairs and what I consider to be the acceptable point of impact. And this works fine because this is short range and I'm using a good bullet for shooting at range. So for most normal hunting, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Yeah, that's a whopping 52 meters to where he fell. I have one shot left. I'm going to put that on the 540 target simply because that has the 15 centimeter vital area reference which we've shot against earlier seasons. And we are now more or less on the edge of what you can do reliably with a second focal plane scope. That's a 541 target. The yellow is the vital area which we are aiming to hit. So again, I'm looking left to right, and it's definitely a light wind. I would also say it's a medium wind, and it's not a strong wind. I'm not seeing any branches being bent, which means I should be aiming on the edge of the area that I want to hit. The Norwegian term for that target is I met myself in the door. I tried to make an argument and it was countered by another argument which I myself made on a previous occasion. And this wasn't really the lesson I wanted, but it goes to show that fundamental marksmanship together with simple procedures do work if you use pointed bullets. And pointed bullets, that's code for a beneficial BC. Now I'm not going to say high BC, but beneficial BC. And if you look at the G1 number, you will find that that's going to be anything from 0.45 and higher. If you are in the area of 0.5 to 0.6, you're going to do okay. If you fall down below 4, it's going to get unnecessarily difficult, and if you go as low as 0.3, you're just being silly. Now this wasn't the day I was hoping for, but it's the one I got, and I really just have to acknowledge my current state of shooting. It's been an 8-month hiatus, and of course performance is not going to be top notch. Now if you remember last year, I was posing with my Kiplau rifle and saying something smart ass about fundamental marksmanship. Those words hold true, but as today plainly shows you, these rifles are more finicky to shoot and they do require more work on the fundamental marksmanship. Another demonstration which we inadvertently made is how much better an anatomically fitted rifle really is. The reason is quite simply that it forces you into the correct position and you actively have to do very stupid things to shoot poorly. Compared to this rifle, where you actually have to find the correct position. But other than that, if you apply the fundamental marksmanship, you will get the same results with these two rifles. This is a very beautiful rifle. It's smart and elegant. Stupid solution here, but okay, done is done. Fantastic wood. I did put in effort to preserve this as good as I can, but it will be used, and it's not going to be this pretty in a couple of years. No pride of ownership whatsoever in this. This is a shooting machine. It just works. And it has the added benefit, you can just throw it away. Nothing's going to happen with that rifle. This rifle, nah, I'm not going to throw it away.
Subscribe to the THLR channel by clicking the left logo icon, so you'll be shooting straighter than a drunk skunk before the sun shines over northern Norway.